Hi everyone. In this lecture, we'll be talking about closing a session or a group. So first of all, in the closing phase of a group or at the end of a session, as the facilitator, we're going to highlight, did we really focus on? What were the main points? And also, it's really typical for people within the group to share really major ideas I have found during the last 5 minutes of a session. And so you're almost always going to have something to work on the following week. And it's good to highlight that to say, I'm hearing this theme and we're going to make sure we bring this up next week. And some of the interventions that you use for the beginning of the group are also good for closing the group. So rounds, dyads, summarizing. One of my favorite ways to close a session, and we might do this together, we can kind of decide, since I'm with a group of future leaders as well. I often ask for a group member or a supervisee, depending on what kind of group I'm running, to write a letter to a future group member to tell them how they can get the most out of the group experience. It's really good to be very focused when we're in the closing phase. Endings make people anxious. A lot of times, people think about when a couple breaks up. It's very typical for there to be, some initial animosity because it's easier to leave someone if you're angry. And so, someone might try to bring up something new, somebody might try to get angry, and it's really important that you bring it back to the here and now and say, today we're really just going to focus on closure and what that means for us as a group and for individuals. It's good to look at themes, issues, what are people going to do once they leave the group? Doing summaries. Sometimes, depending on the group experience, it's good for group members to give each other feedback. So one intervention that I sometimes use is called a hope or a wish. And you can have group members offer a hope or a wish to another group member or to the group as a whole. And with closing, you just want to make sure that you're giving everybody enough time to process and to share with the group. Another reason why the rounds and the dyads are a good way to engage in a closing ritual. It's not uncommon for someone to bring up criticism of the session. Just a reminder, we're all here to grow. Nobody's perfect. I think that's what we're modeling. We're good enough. We're doing the best we can at this thing we call humaning, if you will. And so sometimes, and again, if people aren't comfortable with endings, they're more likely to get, agitated. And so it's just, you're going to use your counseling skills here. So thank you so much for that feedback. I'll be sure to consider what you've provided for me the next time the group is offered. And then just leave it at that. The purpose or the goal of the closing stage of group is to summarize, to look back on how people have grown and changed. What else do they need to do? Sometimes, especially within substance abuse counseling, it's very typical for someone to come 6 to 8 times before they're really engaged in a recovery process. And so, ending with, what are they going to do to continue on their recovery path, is important when you're thinking about what else do they need to examine in terms of unfinished business. What kind of supports will they have in place in lieu of the group? Getting feedback from each other, giving feedback, what it was like for you. I think this is where a little self-disclosure helps to, then you can share power and create empowerment opportunities for your group members. Here are some interventions the author has offered. We talked about rounds, we talked about wishes, reunion fantasy. I haven't heard of this one before, but that could be really interesting. What might it be like? It kind of reminds me of the miracle question. So, what if we all got together in 5 years from now? What might that be like? I always ask for written feedback. We're always consistently evaluating our work. And even if your agency doesn't do that, doesn't seek feedback, I encourage you to get your own feedback, either verbal or in writing. And it's good, I always like it when my members can leave with a packet of something. This might be the teacher in me, but I always have a folder with worksheets and handouts and things that my group members get to leave with. And it's very common for people to have feelings, around separation if they haven't had good closure, or if, their defense mechanisms have typically come up at the end. And so really helping them to sit in that emotional state and to know that they can get through it. And closure can be a good thing because it means new beginnings. And doing everything you can to kind of keep people grounded and balanced. I often will end with some type of self-compassion ritual. And definitely after you finish a group, if you can check in with group members at 3, 6, 9, 12 months out to kind of see, what skills are they still able to implement, what's falling behind. That'll just give you good feedback for developing the group and editing it, as it's always an ongoing process. Nothing just stays in one place. We too, as leaders, are always growing and developing. And that's it for the closing stage.